Hi everybody, welcome to Caketastic Cakes. It's Jen, and I'm going to give you a quick little rundown on how I made Huggy Wuggy from Poppy Playtime out of Fondant. And if you see me use any tools or supplies you could use, check the link in the description below. It should be able to help you out. Now, I'm using fondant. Normally I use gum paste, but I decided to use fondant this time, and I treated it all with CMC powder, so it got nice and stiff, or nice and firmer anyway. And yeah, so this is what I'm doing. I made a shape out of his body, for his body, kind of like a square, as you can see, a rounded square that I ran through with a lollipop stick and stuck it in a piece of styrofoam. That's going to become his torso. His arms and legs are super long and very thin, so I rolled out some blue. I rolled it really long, and if you're going to measure it out, his legs and his arms are about 2.5 times the size of his body. So if you have that kind of ratio going, proportionally, he should look pretty good. Now I'll do it again for you here. I had made the leg, got the right length. I pressed down on the one end, add a little bit of water, and then slip that little flattened part underneath the body to make it sit. And when you do place his legs, make sure you place them to the outside of the body so he has quite the thigh gap going, if you know what I mean. Alright, his arms are pretty much the same as his legs, except he's got a little flare around the cuffs, or around his wrists. So I use my ball tool to just kind of cup the end of it to make it a little bit wider, but otherwise it's the same as the legs. Press the one end down, add a little bit of water to it, connect it right at the top, on top of the shoulders, do it for both arms, and you've got arms. Now I'm using a little pair of scissors that I have. I think these are sewing scissors actually that I stick in my toolbox. And I'm just snipping all over the body to try to replicate his shaggy fur. If you guys have a better way of doing this, I would love to hear it. This is just what I tried to do. And I think it works pretty well. It's not the best, but it certainly does give a fuzzy effect, or at least a furry effect. Or maybe more like a, a cactusy effect. But yeah, if you guys know a better way, I really would love to hear it. So leave it in the comments below for me so I can always improve too. So yeah, I just do the scissors, go over his arms, go over his legs, go over his body. I'm going to try to pay careful attention to the joints, so where the shoulders come together with the arms as well as the legs and the hips. Make sure around his little wrist cuffs, you get a good fluff going. And that's what I did. That's what I did. Okay. Now I trimmed off some of the extra lollipop stick, and I'm going to do his head now. And as long as his head is about the same size as his torso, it should look good. It's kind of triangular, so I got the two little points going at the top on either end. And I'm using my ball tool here to create the outline for his mouth. I'm going to have his mouth open so you can see his lovely teeth. And I started with the smile going across the bottom. And then in the center, it goes up a little high and then down and loops around to the sides again, almost like a cat's mouth, if you want to imagine that, like a cat or a dog smile. And that's what I'm doing. I'm indenting all of it so it's all recessed, and we'll fill it in. I make two little holes for his eyes, and his eyes are not real big. And they kind of sit down inside the niche where his mouth isn't. So just be careful of the placement. I'm adding a little bit of black fondant here into the mouth, and I'm using my ball tool again, just pressing it all down in there to kind of fill it in and flatten it, make it look a little bit better. Now I'm going to add some of his fur to his head. As I realize as I'm doing this, his head is getting more and more stiff. It's kind of setting up. So I snipped all over, make him fuzzy. Then I take some red, roll it out really long, really thin. I actually mixed it with a little bit of brown, so it's not bright red. It's more of a dull red. And then I'm going to outline the mouth in water. That was what I just did there. And then go all around with my nice big round lips. And he kind of reminds me of a Muppet or a puppet like this. But that's what he looks like, so that's what I'm doing. I'm going to cut off the extra at the bottom, and then add a little bit of water to put the pieces together, and I'm going to use that tool to kind of blend the seams so you don't see it quite as much. Now his eyes, I'm going to fill in with some white balls of fondant, press them down kind of flat, and then add two little black balls. And when you add the black, it does take up most of the white, but make sure you can see a nice white crescent all around it, okay? So don't fill in half of the eye with white and half with black. Make sure there's a crescent there. A little highlight in each eye, and then we're going to add the teeth. And the teeth are going to be super easy. They're going to be like every, childhood Play-Doh-y or card construction paper type craft you've ever made teeth. I rolled out my white nice and thin, and I'm just cutting out little triangle slices, like little pieces of pizza or something like that. I cut a whole bunch of them. I cut them in different sizes, slightly different shapes, but overall very long and thin. His teeth are not symmetrical, they're not uniform. Some are big, some are small, some are long, some are short. Kind of doesn't matter where it is. They're just all jaggedy and sharky, really. So I'm putting some of the longer ones where I have room, some of the shorter pieces up in the corners, and it's not even in any way. And that's it. You just slide the head on. There you go. Okay. A few more little details. We're going to add his hands and feet. I took this kind of a yellowy lime green sort of color. And you're basically, again, I'm going to reference Muppets, going to make like Muppet hands for him, just kind of like mittens or mitten paws, kind of. I cut a wedge out for the thumb. I made a couple imprints in order to give him kind of the idea of fingers on his little mitteny hand part. So again, I separated the thumb out, a couple little imprints. I'm going to pinch off the one end a little bit so I can slide it up into the groove that I made where the wrist gets all fluffy and wide. Do the same thing with the feet. He's got Muppet feet. And there you go. One last thing for Huggy Wuggy here. We're going to give him his little bow tie around his neck. So I rolled out some of the same colored blue, really long and thin, and I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm just going to wrap some of it around his neck. I'm going to hold it in place with a little bit of water. Going to wrap it around, trip off the extra there. Not too worried about that little tag hanging because it's going to get covered. I'm going to take that same piece, just make a couple little loops right there on my countertop. Going to put those in place with a little bit of water also. Just press it and make sure your loop stays nice and loopy. Same thing on the other side there, so that you got two little loops connected in the middle. I'm going to add a little piece right there to hide the seam between the two bows, and two long straight pieces again on either side of that little fake knot you got there. And that's it. There's Huggy Wuggy from Poppy Playtime. So yeah, creepy, fun, there you go. Now, I hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe because it really does help me out. I've got a lot of other videos out there, so please take a look, as well as a lot of other video game characters. And as always, thank you for watching Caketastic Cakes.